Hi, I'm Avi Feingold. I'm the co-host of Bonjour Chai on the CJN Podcast Network and a contributing editor for the CJN magazine. Bonjour Chai is Canada's weekly Jewish discussion and debate podcast. We discuss the issues that are important to Jewish Canadians. The stereotype of Canadians is that we either all agree with each other or we disagree and we don't want to talk about it and we don't fight and we don't argue. We do our thing quietly and off to the side. And it's not always true. I like to think that Canadian Jews have strong disagreements, but that are respectful about it. I think historically that has been the case. And hearing two people disagree in a loving, friendly, idea-based sort of way, hopefully is a model for other people to have these conversations themselves. And I think it's important for people to be able to hear these things. We can't do this without your support. Your donation goes a long way to helping us bring you the stories that you want to hear. Please visit thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you can even get a tax receipt.
I'm just trying to keep it peaceful.
And I appreciate that.
So if I can ask you just to move that way for us, okay? Then maybe we can de-escalate. Okay? Thank you. Yeah? Come on. I know. I just go back to the left side.
That's what it sounded like last Sunday in Toronto at the weekly Rally for Israel, when uniformed Toronto police officers were on hand to try to keep pro-Palestinian protesters away from the west side of Bathurst Street, where for over 60 weeks a group of Jewish people and allies come out to wave the Israeli flag, sing songs, and pray for the return of the hostages and for the safety of IDF soldiers. It takes dozens of police officers on duty sometimes, along with metal barricades, command vehicles, even bicycles to handle the situation. Every so often, somebody gets arrested as police try to de-escalate rather than keep the Palestinian supporters from exercising their constitutional rights to be there at all. It's a continuing irritant and an example of how, for more than a year now, since October 7th, Toronto police have spent millions and devoted countless hours and resources keeping tabs on an estimated 2,000 demonstrations related to the Israel-Gaza conflict. While for its part, the Toronto Jewish communities had to spend millions in extra private security guards to protect their synagogues, schools, community centers from vandalism, gunshots, bomb threats, and more. Jewish leaders and allies on Toronto City Council have asked the city repeatedly to do more to keep the community safe. An anti-hate program was put in place. The police have been cooperating more with municipal bylaw officers at protests. But attempts this spring to get the city to ask Ontario to bring in bubble legislation was narrowly defeated. Also, a recommendation the city adopted a year ago to set up community safety zones didn't go anywhere either.
When there was a lot of anti-Asian hatred at the top end of the pandemic, the city acted. When there was the George Floyd murder, there was a realization of the problems that we faced. The city acted. And with this, it's been timid. It's been baby steps. There's not the urgency there that it requires.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News and sponsored in part by the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin Charitable Foundation.
There's not that many news outlets that are covering Canadian Jewish arts these days, so we're really doing something unique. Hi, I'm Ilana Zakon.
And I'm David Sklar.
And we're the hosts of Culturally Jewish.
In these times right now of growing anti-Semitism, I think a lot of Jewish artists are feeling very isolated from their own arts communities.
You know, it's very isolating being in the arts world in Canada, and we get a chance to meet people from all over the country who are dealing with it in all sorts of different ways.
It also makes me feel more proud to be a Jewish artist right now. We would say there's no one out there who understands what we're going through, who feels the way we feel. Are we going crazy, right? Or is the world going crazy? And when we get together and we chat with these artists, we say we are not alone, that there are other people who are going through the same thing. And it actually makes me more proud to be a Jew and a Jewish artist.
To support our work and to keep up to date on everything that's happening at the Canadian Jewish News, visit thecjn.ca/donate.
The item coming before Toronto City Council is called Policy Framework, City Response to Demonstrations. If they pass it, it won't actually bring in bubble legislation right away. City staff have to go and draft the bylaw, then bring it to the mayor's executive committee, and that won't happen until the first quarter of 2025. And then it still has to be voted on by the full council. Mayor Chow isn't saying whether she's in favor of bubble legislation, but she told us she fully supports another measure in the document. It's a fund with $2.5 million in it to help owners install bollards and other traffic safety barriers around their buildings to prevent ramming attacks, or worse, like car bombs. There will also be a review of how permits are granted for demonstrations, all the while still allowing people the right to free speech and to protest. In recent weeks, the mayor's been under tremendous pressure to show more solidarity with her Jewish voters. She signed a petition against anti-Semitism during an interfaith meeting. The special envoy, Deborah Lyons, has been pushing her hard to be more public on what the city's doing on this file. And a few days ago, Chow's media relations team sent us at the CJN an advance notice of this new Framework Action Plan item, with a statement from the mayor already prepared that we could quote. So who's behind this renewed effort to tackle protests, and will it satisfy everyone? We have 2 interviews. Later, we'll hear from Councillor Josh Matlow. But first, joining us now is Councillor James Pasternak, who represents the York Centre ward. He's been a vocal critic of the mayor and council's perceived stalling on the issue. Pasternak joined me from California, where he was attending a conference of mayors concerned about anti-Semitism. He says Toronto's mayor asked him to attend in her place. Can you give us the backdrop to how this particular date item got here for December 17th?
Well, this was not an easy road. This was a battle for many months after October the 7th for the city to take a principled stand to uphold our current laws, to enforce the City of Toronto hate rallies policy, to respond to the hate rallies that are on our street, that were destabilizing the city, that clearly had many elements that went way over the line. I've observed some of them, swastikas, Hitler salutes, calling for intifada and the genocide of Jews. They were illegal, they were despicable, and the response by the City of Toronto has been inadequate.
There have been several attempts, including by you seconding a motion in May, to get a bubble legislation type thing happening. It was asked by your colleague Brad Bradford to go to the Attorney General to impose something provincially. That didn't happen either. What do you see as the importance, if you can break it down into the couple of things that the city is proposing to do?
Well, firstly, I would say that police have done the best they could. They've provided the resources necessary to protect the Jewish community. They've been extremely responsive, and they're working under very difficult circumstances with a lack of political support. The problem here was that we were deeply frustrated that the things that other municipalities were doing, Toronto was lagging behind, and one of them was this what we often call bubble zones. And on October 11th, 2023, so just a few days later, our first council meeting, we did ask the city solicitor to come back with a framework, a bylaw framework for bubble zones. And for some reason, that never happened. And we had to really push the issue when there was clearly an indication that that would not happen, even though it was a council direction. Councillor Bradford and I felt we should ask the province to pass legislation. That also was defeated at City Council. That probably the nastiest floor fight I have seen in the 14 years I've been at City Hall. The mayor vigorously fought that, and then we were left with a vacuum. So yes, we had opposition, and we really were one vote away. And all it was a benign request from the province to consider passing legislation that would protect places of worship, faith-based schools, and faith-based cultural institutions, such as the Holocaust Museum or the Aga Khan. So it was for all faiths, and it meant enormous opposition, with a bizarre argument that this would affect charter rights, and that this would affect labor picketing. Both incorrect. So even before that, we did have hate-sponsored rallies policy that John Tory and I put in, and it was a response to Al-Quds Day, which was really the warning sign that the city was on a perilous course. And
Al-Quds Day is this hate fest, usually down University Avenue in front of the American consulate, and they protest with Hamas signs, Hezbollah signs. People wear suicide bomber paraphernalia, and it's really horrible. And the city's allowed it to go on every single year.
Right. Well, it originally got its start with the blessing of the provincial government, because the Sergeant at Arms and the Speaker of the House under Dalton McGuinty granted permits.
Right, and they used to do it outside Queen's Park. Okay, back to what's happening now.
Okay.
So we have this proposal, December 17th, putting together a bubble legislation and coming back in the first quarter of 2025.
Well, this is my problem. So we can work with this. I'm not going to say it's a waste of time and it doesn't have value, but these are baby steps. We have an urgent crisis, urban crisis on our hands here, and to write in here that they're going to report back within another 3 months after delaying all the urgent policies that we either existing that we needed enforced, or a restatement of new policy. To wait another 3 months is deeply frustrating. And there are some gaps here that we don't know. We don't really know where they're going. There's no guarantee we're going to get the bubble zones. We don't know whether we're going to get the desperately needed collaboration with the other levels of government, such as the RCMP and the OPP. There's a jurisdictional lens here, which I think is good. And we feel the other levels of government have not come to the table to backstop Toronto Police Service. I mean, one example was when the Italian Prime Minister came to Toronto, it was the responsibility of the RCMP to handle security. RCMP is the lead. Well, for those listeners who know, this thing was a total international embarrassment. It was a total fiasco, with a small number of hooligans blocking the entranceway. No real attempt to create a security corridor, either for the Prime Minister of Italy or our own Prime Minister. So you had hundreds of people in there for a state dinner, which was canceled.
We're going to come back and to the things that the city council there's a few of them, but these are the main things. One is thinking about how bubble legislation would work, modeled on Calgary, modeled on Vaughan. Now, Vaughan just had its first test a week ago, and it was a complete failure, according to some people, because the protesters were louder. They were right across the street within the 100. So having this legislation is great on the books, but then what has to happen next?
Well, clearly we need the provincial and federal governments to help backstop Toronto Police Service. We cannot manage this situation with the thin resources we have. We need the enforcement of current laws, and we need the Ministry of the Attorney General to stop dropping charges that police are laying. And unless there's that collaboration among the three levels of government, this is just going to be endless. The approach of this will pass and de-escalation will not work when it comes to the groups involved in this chaos across our city. The time for waiting it out and keeping everybody apart and sending everyone home, clearly, after 14 months, that has not worked.
But it's not only intimidation of the Jewish community area in front of places of worship. They're doing it on a street corner. So a street corner in a commercial area, how would a bubble legislation work there? Or they would, because this law also, this proposed policy also talks about using bylaw officers, right? Can you elaborate on how this would work and help?
We have been pushing municipal licensing and bylaw enforcement to go after the low-hanging fruit, blocking roadways, amplified sound, smoke bombs, harassing, intimidating, easy stuff, because hate crimes are a whole different kettle of fish. And they have said, well, we don't really do that. We pass that on to police. Then I run over to police headquarters and meet with Chief Demke, and I say, municipal licensing is saying they've handed over bylaw enforcement to you. Chief says that's not true. We haven't taken that on. We don't have the resources for that. But what we'll do is we'll create a safe corridor for bylaw enforcement to issue tickets.
Well, we've seen them out with cameras and what have you, measuring sound at these various protests.
Right, but that was after 12, 13 months of fighting internally.
Is this now more of a streamlined thing, and now they're incorporating that into their tactics?
That's a positive part of this report. There are references to a better collaboration between municipal licensing and bylaw enforcement and police services. So that is encouraging. But this is so long overdue. This is so frustrating, and it's taken enormous energy. It's taken nasty fights at council. It's taken what we call administrative inquiries, where we force staff to answer key questions. I've had to issue several of those, including another one that's coming back on Tuesday, which they haven't responded to. And the reports that we've asked for are going all in different directions, and they're not coming to council. So we really have to stop these shenanigans and get on with and face the crisis that the city is in now.
And they don't even mention the word Jewish in here.
There's no doubt that the overwhelming target of these mobs on our streets are Jewish institutions and Jewish private businesses, such as restaurants or other businesses. But a bubble zone legislation is for all faiths. You don't carve out one faith. Now, other municipalities are doing it. We mentioned Vaughan. There's Brampton as well, and Ottawa's on that
studying
track as well.
Calgary already had one before October 7th.
People say it's not working. It hasn't properly been tested. People say it's unconstitutional. That is a mythology. But police are looking for leadership from the political people, and this provides direction.
Okay, so then there's this fund for bollards and traffic, like what are they called? Car bomb attack infrastructure that you can put in front of buildings. Was that something you pushed for?
I'm going to give some credit to my colleague Diane Sachs. She wanted it in her ward at the Miles Nadal JCC. I finally went up to the city manager and the general manager of transportation. I said, I don't understand what the problem here is. Get the money, get the approvals to do these, because you can clear this one off fairly easily, and then we can get down to the management of these protests. And they clearly have. There's a fund here. We'll have to see how it works. That's a good thing, because obviously the Prosserman BJCC is in my ward. We want that protected. We want the Miles Nadal protected, and then other faiths may find that they are under potential threat, so they can tap into that as well. So that's a good news part of this package here. But I hate to say it, but there's lots of work to do.
Is it going to pass? Is it going to be, now that it's there, you're not going to have the same situation as in May where it wasn't?
I think there'll be enough votes to pass this, because it's sort of an interim report. It only puts in a little bit of stuff that's immediate, and then you never know what other emotions could come forward. I think it's something we can work with. I'm not going to get into a total snit, because it's long overdue. It is long overdue, and I'm deeply frustrated with of course the delay in coming to grips that the crisis is the crisis we face. Many non-Jews across the city are seeing this, and they see a city that's lawless, that is scary, that it's intimidating. People don't want to go downtown, and so you have to ask yourself, what type of city do you want? Do you want a city of respect, and do you want a city where everyone can go about their daily lives in peace and dignity, or do you want it run by mobs?
Councillor Josh Matlow was one of two councillors to vote against asking the province for bubble legislation earlier this year, but he tells the CJN he will support this new wider framework document now. He was asked why he didn't think bubble legislation is an effective tool, and he said because it only covers places of worship and the like, while Jews are targeted all over the city.
the Jewish community, along with others, can face harassment and intimidation, whether it be at Jewish-owned businesses or parks or wherever. So why would we restrict where those supports go? And there's been far more intelligence sharing between city and the police and others, along with the city's transportation division and the emergency management division as well. And they've been working very well together. Now, some people will say, well, why wasn't the safety bubble created to stop the shootings at Jewish girls' schools? And the answer is that would have done nothing to prevent that. All that would have done is it would have said that you were not allowed to dissuade somebody from playing at a synagogue, church, or a mosque. It's already against the law to shoot at a school. That's just a fact. And that obviously, we need to support the police in investigating those horrible crimes and protect the community.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. CIJA, the Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs, also is weighing in on this file. They're pleased the City of Toronto's finally decided to tackle the serious issue of hateful chants and intimidation at demonstrations around Jewish locations. But CIJA says the community has waited far too long to see this. And they caution that any bubble bylaw that Toronto drafts should be better than the one the City of Vaughan adopted because it didn't seem to work last week to prevent protesters from invading the space around the Beth Abraham Yosef of Toronto synagogue. Our podcast is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. Our executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine, and a special thanks to Kareem Assad for the use of the opening audio. Thanks for listening, and watch the CJN.ca website to see what happens at City Council this week.
My name is Rivka Campbell, and I am the host of the CJN podcast, Rivkush. My podcast is a focus on Jews of color talking about anything. It's really important for mainstream Jews to see that I am just as Jewish as you. The topics that interest you also interest me. I want to talk about Israel. You want to talk about Israel. I want to talk about food. Maybe it's not the food you want to talk about, but I want to talk about food. It's important that the person talking about Judaism, Israel, whatever, has a face like mine. It really, hopefully, changes the perception of Jews of color. To support my podcast and the rest of the CJN, please make a tax-deductible donation at thecjn.ca/donate.